The film opens with Casey jogging through a snowy wooded area. The atmosphere is cold and desolate, with bare trees creating an eerie backdrop. As she runs, she suddenly sees a blue glove lying on the ground. When she picks it up, she hears whispers and turns to see a strange young boy with unnaturally pale skin and piercing blue eyes staring at her. Disturbed, Casey watches as the boy suddenly vanishes, leaving behind only an unsettling presence. Before she can react, a large black and white dog appears, standing silently and staring at her. The dog suddenly runs away, leading Casey deeper into the woods. Following the dog, she finds its mask on the ground. As she tries pulling it off the floor, she finds a small, decomposing fetus-like creature buried beneath. Horrified, Casey stumbles backward. A few nights later, while babysitting, Casey is on the phone with her best friend Romy, venting about the strange occurrences that have been plaguing her. As they talk, Casey hears unsettling noises coming from upstairs in the infant's room. The sounds are faint at first, a creak, a shuffle, but they grow louder and more insistent. Concerned, Casey ends the call with Romy and cautiously makes her way upstairs. When she opens the door, she finds Maddie, the young boy she's babysitting, holding a mirror up to the baby's face. He whispers, "Look through it," in a voice that doesn't sound like his own. Casey is horrified and tries to intervene, but Maddie suddenly turns on her with a strength far beyond his years. He attacks her, his eyes blank and his movements unnervingly deliberate, leaving Casey shaken and confused. When the parents return, they thank her for watching the children, but Casey decides not to tell them what happened. She brushes it off, but the incident lingers in her mind, a sign that something far more sinister is at work. The next morning, Casey prepares breakfast. She cracks open an egg, only to find a cockroach wriggling inside. The sight is grotesque and unsettling, and she immediately throws the eggs into the sink, her hands trembling. As she looks out the window, she sees Maddie standing on her driveway, staring at her with an expression that is both blank and menacing. At school, Casey confides in her friends about the strange events she's been experiencing. She tells them about the babysitting incident, the cockroach in the egg, and Maddie's appearance on her driveway. Romy, who is more superstitious, mentions an old belief that infants should never be allowed to look into mirrors. She explains that some cultures believe mirrors can trap or distort souls, especially those of the very young. Casey's boyfriend Mark, however, dismisses the idea, insisting that Maddie was just messing around and that Casey is overthinking things. During class, Casey's vision begins to blur, and she finds it difficult to concentrate. The world around her seems to warp and shift, as though reality itself is unraveling. Suddenly, she sees the cockroach from earlier crawling across her desk. She gasps and jumps back, drawing the attention of her classmates and professor. Embarrassed and frightened, she leaves the room, her heart racing. Later, after showering in the girls' locker room, Romy notices something unusual about Casey's eye. She points out that one of Casey's eyes looks different, almost as though it's changing color. Concerned, Romy urges Casey to see a doctor. Casey reluctantly agrees, and the doctor confirms that she has heterochromia, a condition that causes her eyes to be different colors. He takes photos of her eye for further analysis and mentions that her condition might be linked to an extra placenta, suggesting she had a twin who died before birth. The revelation is shocking and deeply unsettling. Casey had no idea she was a twin, and the news raises more questions than answers. Determined to uncover the truth, Casey confronts her father at his office. She demands answers, and after some hesitation, he admits that she did have a twin brother who died before they were born. He explains that it was a painful chapter in their family's history, one they never discussed. The revelation leaves Casey reeling. She feels betrayed that her father kept this from her and confused about what it means for her identity. Casey returns home and begins searching through old family photos, hoping to find clues about her past. She comes across an article and a photo of her pregnant mother with the boy from her dreams standing beside her. The image is chilling and surreal, as though the boy exists outside of time and space. Casey realizes that the boy is not just a figment of her imagination, he's tied to her family's history in a way she doesn't yet understand. The next day, Casey convinces Romy to accompany her to visit Sophie Cosma, an elderly woman mentioned in the article she found. Sophie lives in a nursing home, and her room is filled with trinkets and old photographs. At first, Sophie is warm and welcoming, but when Casey shows her the photo of the boy, her demeanor changes. She becomes visibly uncomfortable and insists that she doesn't know Casey's mother. Her reaction is suspicious, and Casey senses that Sophie is hiding something. When pressed, Sophie becomes agitated and asks them to leave. As they walk away, Casey becomes more convinced that Sophie knows something important, something that could explain the boy's connection to her family. Later, Casey convinces Mark to watch an old tape she found in the basement. The tape shows footage from the mental institution where her mother was treated. The images are grainy and unsettling, revealing dark hallways and patients who seem to be in distress. At one point, the camera captures a room where something horrific appears to be happening, but the tape cuts off abruptly before they can see what it is. The footage leaves them both shaken and raises more questions about what happened to Casey's mother and how it ties into the supernatural forces haunting her. That evening, Mark takes Casey to a club in an attempt to distract her from her troubles. The club is loud and crowded, but Casey can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. Her vision distorts again, and she sees the boy in the crowd, his eyes fixed on her. Panicked, she retreats to the restroom, where she experiences a horrifying hallucination. She sees her mother's ghost emerging from a toilet, her face twisted in agony. The room fills with cockroaches, and Casey is overwhelmed by a sense of dread. Her friends find her and calm her down, but the experience leaves her deeply shaken. She realizes that the supernatural forces are growing stronger and that she can't escape them. That night, Casey goes to bed, exhausted and emotionally drained. But sleep offers no respite. She wakes up to find herself stuck on the ceiling, looking down at her own body asleep on the bed. The boy is there, next to her body, his hand moving on her stomach. Casey tries to scream, but no sound comes out. She is powerless, trapped in a nightmare that feels all too real. Casey then wakes up to her phone ringing. It's Sophie. She admits that she lied about not knowing Casey's mother and invites her to visit the institution immediately. That night, Casey visits Sophie alone. Sophie's confession is delivered in a hushed, trembling voice, as though she fears the demon might overhear. She reveals that she is Casey's grandmother, a fact she kept hidden to protect Casey from the dark truth. Sophie recounts the horrors of her childhood during World War II, when she and her twin brother were captured by the Nazis. The Nazis, obsessed with the idea that twins held the key to genetic mastery, subjected them to brutal experiments. Many twins died, including Sophie's brother. But 2 days after his death, he returned, not as himself, but as a vessel for a demonic entity. Sophie's voice breaks as she describes the moment she realized her brother was gone and that something evil had taken his place. She had no choice but to kill him, an act that has haunted her ever since. Sophie explains that the demon has been trying to return to the human world ever since, and it now sees Casey as its next target. The heterochromia in Casey's eye is a sign that the demon is already influencing her, trying to claim her body as its own. Casey is horrified but determined to fight back. She asks Sophie how she can stop the demon, and Sophie tells her about the Book of Mirrors, an ancient text that contains the knowledge needed to perform an exorcism. She also mentions Joseph, a man who might be able to help Casey in her battle against the demon. Casey's journey to find the Book of Mirrors is fraught with tension. The library she visits is vast and labyrinthine, its shelves filled with dusty, forgotten tomes. When she finally locates the book, she feels a mix of relief and trepidation. The book is old and heavy, its cover adorned with strange symbols that seem to shift and writhe under her gaze. However, the text is written in a language she cannot understand, a barrier that only heightens her frustration and fear. Desperate, Casey steals the book and seeks out a language professor by the name of Rabbi, to translate it. Rabbi is initially hesitant, warning Casey that performing an exorcism is dangerous and beyond his experience. But Casey's desperation and determination convince him to at least translate the text. He agrees to begin the next day, and Casey leaves the book with him, hoping that the answers she needs are within its pages. That night, Casey's dreams are plagued by visions of her childhood. She sees herself as a young girl visiting her mother in the mental institution, a memory that is both tender and haunting. Her mother, gaunt and hollow-eyed, seems to recognize her but is unable to speak or interact. The dream shifts abruptly, and Casey wakes up in a cold sweat. She looks out her window and sees Matty standing in the backyard, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Meanwhile, Sophie also senses the demon's presence. She wakes up in the middle of the night, her room filled with an oppressive darkness. She begins to pray, her voice trembling but resolute. The lights flicker and die, plunging the room into shadow. Sophie ventures downstairs, her footsteps echoing in the empty halls. She encounters another patient, a man who should not be there. Unfortunately, Sophie realizes too late that he is possessed by the demon. It chases her, its movements unnervingly fast and deliberate. Despite her prayers and her strength, Sophie is overpowered and killed, her death a tragic loss for Casey. The next day, Casey and Romy arrive at the institution to find it surrounded by police. The officers explain that Sophie's death has been ruled an accident, but Casey knows the truth. The demon killed Sophie, and its power is growing. Before leaving, Sophie's friend hands Casey a letter that Sophie had prepared in case of her death. The letter is a mix of warmth and warning. Sophie expresses her love for Casey and her hope that she can break the curse. She advises Casey to remain strong and not to give in to fear, as the demon feeds on it. The letter is a bittersweet reminder of Sophie's courage and the sacrifices she made to protect her family. That evening, Casey meets Mark at a diner. She tells Mark everything: the experiments, the demon, Sophie's death, and the Book of Mirrors. Mark listens in stunned silence, his initial skepticism giving way to concern and determination. He promises to stand by Casey and help her in any way he can. The next day, Casey, Rabbi and Mark enlist the help of Arthur, a man experienced in performing exorcisms. Arthur is gruff and no-nonsense, his demeanor a stark contrast to the rabbi's calm and scholarly presence. Together, they prepare for the ritual, gathering volunteers and setting up in an old chapel. The chapel is cold and drafty, its walls lined with faded religious paintings that seem to watch over them with solemn eyes. The group forms a sacred circle around Casey, reciting prayers to protect themselves from the demon. As the ritual begins, the chapel is plunged into chaos. The lights flicker and die, and a powerful wind sweeps through the room, extinguishing candles and scattering papers. The demon manifests, its presence overwhelming and terrifying. It possesses Arthur first, his body contorting unnaturally as the demon takes control. The group is forced to flee to another room, but the demon follows, its laughter echoing through the halls. It then possesses Mark, leaving Casey with no choice but to run and leave him behind. Rabbi, however, remains steadfast. He continues reading from the Book of Mirrors, his voice steady and unwavering despite the chaos. The demon, trapped in Mark's body, begins to scream in agony as the ritual takes effect. With a final, ear-piercing shriek, the demon is destroyed, leaving Mark's lifeless body on the floor. The exorcism is successful, but the cost is devastating. A few months later, Casey discovers that she is pregnant. During an ultrasound, she learns that she is carrying twins. The revelation is both joyous and ominous, as it hints at the possibility that the curse may not be fully vanquished.